Hi everybody, I'm Nicole Gurran, Professor of Urban and Regional Planning here at the University of Sydney, and I also direct the Henry Halloran Research Trust, which I'll say a tiny bit about in a moment. Because first, of course, I want to acknowledge that we are meeting here tonight on the unceded lands of the Gadigal country in the Eora Nation, on whose lands the University of Sydney stands. And in making this acknowledgement and in recognising elders past, present and emerging, I particularly want to recall the words of Uncle Charles or Chicka Madden, a very well respected Gadigal elder and important artist as well, who gave us at the start of this week-long Festival of Urbanism a very gracious welcome to country in this room, and he reminded us how important country is to all of us and our obligations to it. And in fact, today one of the real festival highlights was walking through Redfern Waterloo, just a little, just a few blocks from here, and with the public housing tenants who are led by Red Watch. And they actually took us through a tour of sites of recent Aboriginal historical importance too, and reminded us that Redfern Waterloo is where amazing services began. Redfern Legal Service, dear to my heart, the Aboriginal Housing Office, recently celebrated 50 years, Aboriginal theatre, Aboriginal art, and of course the homeland of many amazing Aboriginal athletes, with which I wanted to use as a segue into tonight's event around, sport, art, the public realm, public places. And so with that, welcome very much to this final event this evening, and first event for those of you who haven't been part of the Festival of Urbanism this week. But the Festival of Urbanism is part of the Henry Halloran Research Trust. We're a multidisciplinary research centre across the university, and we basically have two missions. One is to draw on the different bodies of knowledge in our university and beyond, from art, from politics, from architecture, design and planning, and to throw that knowledge at issues facing cities and regions and urban and regional communities, and to do that in conversation with government, with community leaders and with the wider public. And the Festival of Urbanism is our annual event, and it's one of the ways that we do that. And we called this year, as we've done in the past, for proposals from friends across the university to put forward a Festival of Urbanism event. And we're absolutely blown away by the proposal that Dr Indigo Willing put forward with her colleagues, that combined for us both all of the things that kind of fascinate and bug us about the city, but in a way that there's no way that I, as an urban planner or urbanist, would be able to come at. And that is, of course, public art, the design of public spaces that are publicly inclusive, as well as, the sport athletes. We know skating now is an Olympic sport. So I'm not going to say anything more aside from reminding you that after this amazing panel, and I'm going to introduce and hand over to Indigo as your chair in a moment, but I wanted to tell you that afterwards at about 6:30-ish, when we finish, there's going to be some, food and some drinks, and we'd love you to stay along and meet some of the speakers and, of course, carry on the conversation that I know they're going to spark. So now let me introduce Dr. Indigo Willing, who's a skateboarder. She's written, Indigo, Skateboarding, Power and Change. What a great book published by Palgrave Macmillan last year. She's a visiting fellow here at SSHARC for the Skate, Create, Educate and Regenerate project here at the University of Sydney. She's working in collaboration with Professor Lee Wallace, who I see here in the room, Dr. Sanna Maestrom, and PhD student Nadia Odlam from the Art Play Risk project, as well as Associate Professor Leanne Loke, who is also part of my Faculty of Architecture, Design and Planning. Indigo's just been awarded a 2024-25 Churchill Fellowship to research skateboarding and urbanism abroad in the US, UK and Germany next year. Congratulations, Indigo. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Nicole Gurin. We really are thrilled to be able to have these conversations about skateboarding without being arrested and told to move on, which is our normal experience when we have our skateboards on campus. Just a very brief background is that I'm a sociologist, as I guess it's just been explained. I'm a war orphan, an adoptee, I'm a skateboarder, and I'm the co-chair of SkateCER, which is an organisation that builds skateparks around the world, but particularly for children in conflict zones. And they were the topic of an Academy Award-winning documentary called Learning How to Skateboard in a War Zone If You're a Girl. And a little aside from that I really wanted just to share is that once they started building skate spaces in places like Kabul, under the Taliban, in different times of course now, but they were able to raise the skateboarding participation of girls up to 40%, which actually rivaled and surpassed what happens in the West. So if you can imagine Afghanistan doing that with skateboarding, you can imagine what every place can do with that. We're very honoured to be here on Gadigal country, in Darug country and in Warang land as well. So thank you, and I really love to just share a little bit about what skateboarding is seen. It's seen as often a deviant thing. Skateboarders themselves are very tough, and sometimes they call it not a sport. Maybe they're opposed to it being an urban sport and they call it something like a violent ballet, which I really love. Today in the panel, a few people earlier had called it a form of art rather than a sport as well. It's many things to many people, and I think we're going to hear more about that tonight. But one of the interesting things is we are at a time where there's a lot of defensive architecture around the city that's telling us you're not welcome here and that you need to move on. At the same time, we have this this very unusual paradox that we have 14-year-old girls who are Olympic champions. So we have Arissa True, who has broken world records. She's the youngest athlete in Australia to win a gold medal, surpassing a swimmer. And we have really amazing people like Liv Lovelace, Hayley Powell, Ruby True. We have obviously our wonderful panel tonight as well. So we really have to ask ourselves questions about what sort of assumptions we have around skateboarding and how they're actually being broken by people from the margins and people that aren't normally considered traditionally part of skateboarding. I really want us to turn things around and continually question how we look at skateboarders, and also have a listen to how we skate, create, educate and regenerate. So I'm going to briefly introduce the panelists here. Tonight you will be meeting leading change makers in skateboarding, including Nick Hayes, founder of First Nations company Spinifex Skateboard. Here from Gingeraporti, he's an Eastern Laurentian man, a traditional owner from the Northern Territory. We have Timothy Lachlan, who is the founder of WCMX and Adaptive Skateboarding Australia. He's an elite athlete. He's the first person to do a backflip in a wheelchair in Australia, and he was recently touring with Tony Hawk, which is really cool. And we will also be hearing about his various other work as an occupational therapist, of which he's recently graduated. Poppy Starr is a professional skateboarder, an Olympian from the Tokyo Olympics, an artist, an ambassador for Thrive with Pride for the Australian Sports Institute, and many, many other things. So we're looking really forward to hearing your views on urbanism as well, Poppy. And we have William Chan, architect and the youngest councillor in Sydney. I'm sorry, can you correct me? And I'm from Brisbane, I'm from Meanjin, and I'm working my way around something about the various areas of Sydney, but definitely he's done amazing things. He's he's advising the UN and many other things. So when entering the building, you have also been able to view co-designed playable artworks or skate docs, which are an interactive part of our co-hosted 2-day symposium that we've just held called City Canvas, Public Art and Creative Sports, which has been quite an amazing event because it's women's run in an area in a male-dominated sort of scene of skateboarding. We have been able to co-design artwork with Dr. Mestrom here from the Art Play Risk project and her collaborator with that project, Nadia Oglam. So after the panel, you will have a chance to meet the artist and talk with all the panellists here, but also the many really wonderful people who are all experts, and I wish I could have invited them all onto this panel, who have been behind the SkateCER project. They're amazing, really amazing group of skaters that have backgrounds as landscape architects, architecture graduates, artists, and much more. So I'm going to begin with you, Sana. I don't know why I moved that way. I'm going to move this way. Skateboarding invites creativity, but has historically been banned and looked down upon in public places like city plazas and spots, as we'll hear more about tonight. Artworks, on the other hand, are often fenced off and have defensive architecture. So I want to know what attracted you to creating playable public art that can also be skated.
Actually, an accident sort of started the ball rolling for me. I created a large sculpture about 10 years ago, a very large concrete piece for the Monash University Caulfield campus. And on the launch of that particular project, there just happened to be these two children that were running all over this artwork. And I realised in that moment that the work was born. It was not the intention. The gallerists and all the invigilators from the museum were saying, oh my God, what are we going to do? You know, should we ask the kids to get off? And I realised, no, they're actually, it's being generated as we're watching it. And I realised that functional or work that sort of has affordances for play is so fascinating for me. The body and the built environment coming together in the most natural, organic way. And children really, they don't have to think about, or they don't think about what they like, what their bodies want and need. They just respond impulsively. And when I soon after happened to have a child of my own and spent time in playgrounds, traditional playgrounds, I realised how tedious they are, fenced off, siphoned off. Parents, you just sit on the side and you watch, or you push a swing. And it was so painfully dull. And I realised that I'd been incredibly child blind, and that really I needed to bring together my maternal instincts and my knowledge and expertise as a sculptor and create a playable built environment. It was just this really natural, very intuitive fit. It made a lot of sense at the time, so I started doing it. And then eventually it rolled into an academic project that became much more expansive, all about really inclusion in public space. Once you realise your blind spots, like mine I'd been child blind, but then I sort of started looking at, well, who else is being excluded from the public realm? And the vision and the team, the networks became wider and so much more interesting as, you know, the next few years rolled on.
It's such a really interesting perspective. I know that you've spoken in the past about the city being built for a particular demographic. Can you just add something a bit about that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, our cities are, you know, obviously, as we know them now, they're 100, 200 years old. They were built by men for men, typically, and they were not designed for any minority groups, including, you know, I can speak from my experience as a mother, including children, and including many, many other marginalised communities that do occupy the city. We are designed out of the city. And so, you know, really it's the productive consumer that our spaces are designed for, the person that goes to work and spends money. And every bit of urban infrastructure is designed to meet those needs. It's not designed for leisure, it's not designed for play, it's not designed for dwelling. And community happens only when we dwell, when we have places to gather, to commune, to get to know each other, to spend time, have conversations, whether we're adults, we're kids, we're, you know, culturally diverse. That is when community happens. So I guess that a lot of the research that I'm doing is around really identifying who's been excluded from public life and trying to find creative ways to address that.
They're really important angles, and the sort of music to the ears of skateboarders, I believe. Often we're really told that, you know, we don't belong in the city. So it's sort of like a double marginalisation. Firstly, if you're a young person, whatever your identity is, that you don't belong in public space. And then secondly, for young people as well, it's like a double burden of like not being welcome. Your artworks have been actually in a range of public places, not just quarantined to skate parks. And I wanted to ask you, what are some of the social benefits that happen when we're bringing playable and skatable public art into public spaces?
Well, I think the idea of, as I said, this sort of opportunity to commune, to gather, is one of the central outcomes. Ultimately, when I think we rupture the traditional structure of public space, you know, just the buildings, pathways, roads that are, you know, very much just thoroughfares, when we're rupturing that, we're in an urban design sense, we are loosening up public space. Ideologically, I don't want to get academic, but you might say we are subverting it. Any form of non-traditional movement through public space is really it's push against power, and it's quite a political gesture. Like it's really agitating the norms of public space. So I think when we're skating through public space, or if we're creating public artworks that disrupt normal movement, we are actually challenging structures of power that organise and govern public life, and we're sort of really agitating the edges of that, which as an artist is what I love doing. It's what we all do in our various ways.
Thank you for that. We have so many interesting side notes as researchers together in our collaborative project between SkateCER, so Skate, Create, Educate and Regenerate, and Art, Play, Risk. And one of them was when I first saw Sana's artwork. It was at the University of Sydney on the lawn there, and I looked at it and I thought, that's skatable. But in the same way it wasn't, because it was made out of surfboard material.
Fiberglass, yeah.
It had angles that just didn't quite work. And interestingly, with my skateboard, I was often looked down upon on this campus, like, move on, kid. I'm like, no, I'm a lecturer. So it's like, and then 1 year on, we have this co-designed skatable artwork with the skate community out the front of a building that we would normally not be able to skate. So very huge thanks to the director, Michael, as well. So it really is quite amazing that we got these works done from a women's and non-binary and queer-led team.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's sort of showing that the place didn't fall apart.
Yeah.
By letting us have some urban play in a grey space, things are actually...
It's actually, I think, really, I don't think we can underestimate the significance of SSSHARC having permitted us to present and activate that skatable sculpture there, because it sets a precedent that we're hoping other councils and communities will be able to integrate.
Yes, it's and also for the Henry Halloran Research Trust as well for giving us this space to do this as well. So let's move to you, Poppy. Skateboarding is now both a subculture on the streets and a high-performance sport in stadiums like the Olympics, with women at the forefront. Your skating spans both worlds and lived experiences. So I wanted to ask, what was the impact that skateboarding has had on your life? Like, what is so magic about skateboarding?
Skateboarding has had an impact on my life, I think, in so many different ways. I started when I was 8, and it kind of like went from there. I was drawing a lot longer before I started skating, and then the two kind of intertwined, and I could skate, and skating helped my drawing helped my skating, and then I got into competitions and stuff, and I think just, I don't know, skateboarding as a whole just really helped like my confidence in lots of other aspects. I learnt how male-dominated skateboarding was at the same time, and I think that was a pivotal part of my life in I think growing confidence and stuff like that. But it's definitely helped me in many, many ways. Yeah.
What happens when you are in a competition? I've seen you at a few comps, and we have the wonderful Evie Ryder, who's a contemporary of many skaters from a particular era in the 2010s. What's it like when you're in a inclusive gender environment, like a skate competition to an event? What's the difference do you notice when it's run by women and non-binary and queer people, perhaps?
Oh my gosh, it's so much better. I've been in competing since I was 9, and like lots of the Olympic competitions and stuff I do are very structured, and like I've been going lots of competitions last year and the previous 8 years for competitions and things like that, and they're inclusive to everyone, but even there was a topic about, like, I guess there's been competitions in different countries that queer people aren't allowed and stuff. So it's definitely, it can be inclusive, but the competitions run by queer people and women and just non-traditional skateboarders, I always have so much more fun at, because they're just so much inclusive, and I think I can resonate with other people and meet communities that I identify with, and it's just, yeah, it's awesome. I love it.
So that's a really, really good, I guess, promotion in the sense also to get behind events that are like that. When I first started skateboarding, they would have maybe the women's division very early in the morning, or when everybody's having lunch.
Yeah.
There would be maybe actual cash for the men. There would be like stickers if you won for the girls.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, when they would show the footage, the daily like footy of that, you would be lucky to see 1 second of a female competitor, but having a whole division. And we had people like Mimi Noob, who has been really a great advocate in pushing for equality in skateboarding as well. But you yourself have had many roles on and off the board, including as an ambassador for women, non-binary and LGBTQ plus skaters, and you're also an internationally recognised artist, and you have wonderful work out there at the moment. So you also have a book. So just meant so many achievements and wonderful things. I actually was wondering though, in what ways can non-traditional skate communities be better included and supported by cities and designers, given who's in the room?
I think just even being here today and with your project and skatable art, I think is probably at the forefront for me, is just being more included by councils and cities, and to be skated and to not be kicked out of somewhere straight away because you're scratching a ledge or something that no one would ever notice. And skateboarding is such a cool, amazing outlet for kids and people to get outside, and so having more plazas and skatable art and just having the councils get behind it, I think is an amazing outlet for kids and everyone to do. It's been a huge part of my life, and I think that would probably be the main thing that I can think of that would be really cool, is to just be maybe more included, I think. Yeah.
That's really, really important message to share. Okay, so let's now have a chat to you, Timothy Lachlan. You have had multiple roles, including as Australia's only professional WCMX rider, including a recent tour of Tony Hawk for his Tony Hawk Pro Skater Tour into 2023. You're the first athlete to do a backflip in a wheelchair, an occupational therapist, an ambassador, and also many other roles. So we hear often more about skateboarding rather than WCMX and this thing called the skater's eye and how they view the world and its impact on design and architecture. So it'd be great actually to hear it more from your perspective, from the WCMX, and particularly the built environment.
Yeah, so as you said, when you're on a skateboard, you have that skater's eye, but for us wheelchair users, with time we develop something similar. I call it a wheelie's eye. And much like a skateboarder's eye, the wheelie's eye, we learn to, look at angles, look at the height of curbs, the texture, is it gravel, is it grass, stuff like that. And really it comes from a place of necessity. So when we go out in public on our wheelchairs, there's no guarantee that where we're going is going to be accessible, unless you know it for sure, you've been there multiple times. Otherwise, just me coming out to Sydney and exploring places, there's no guarantee it's going to be accessible. So for me, I'm really privileged in the sense that I've got advanced wheelchair skills, so I can jump up and down curbs, go over stairs and stuff like that. But for somebody who's new to a chair, they don't have any of that. So really, I guess the benefit of getting in the skate park in a wheelchair is you sort of learn to play with those angles. You learn what's safe, what's not safe, how do I fall, how do I get back up. And then it's not just those skills, it's you can take that into daily life. So, for example, I'm able to go anywhere in Sydney I want pretty much. And if I have to climb out my chair and climb upstairs, I can do it. If I have to climb up curbs, I can do it, stuff like that. But really that sort of that shared experience of, what goes well with wheels. And like, as I was saying, there's the skate park, it's a very inclusive place. It's a place built for wheels. You see all sorts of devices at the skate park, whether it's scooters, bikes, ripsticks, anything with wheels can generally go in a skate park. So that's, I guess, a really cool benefit of when the environment has universal design elements, that no matter what, a person's ability level, they can still go there and participate.
Okay, I have a continuing on that idea of architecture and the built environment and participation. When you're at a skate park or street spot, what elements stick out for you as an example of good or bad design for urban play?
So generally, speaking from experience as a chair user, things I look for that indicate good design, usually like it's wide enough for a chair to get on, the angle, so like if there's a ramp to get onto it, that ramp's not too steep, it's not too long, just stuff like that. Also, again, comes back to the surface. Is it like really tough pebblecrete? Is it smooth concrete? Is it polished concrete? Different sorts of elements like that are things that I look for. And really, I guess a key thing to me that says if something's inclusive is has people with disability been involved in the process? Has there been co-design? Have people with disabilities been consulted before, an obstacle or park has been opened? Because really, that's the true measure of inclusion. Is it they've just ticked a box and said, yeah, we chatted to someone with a disability, or did they actually have a whole team of disabled people with different disabilities, giving their input so that way we can make the built environment as inclusive as possible.
Thank you. And may I ask, what has been one of your favourite memories, I guess, during your WCMX, and particularly in the teaching role? Because I've seen lots of your videos when you have kids coming in and doing it with you.
I've got sort of two favourites. So I guess my biggest favourite that you mentioned already, I got the chance to skate alongside Tony Hawk, and that's, you know, been a childhood dream. I got into skateboarding just by playing his video games, and there was like one character in one of his games who's in a wheelchair, and I drew a lot of my inspiration from the tricks that, you know, you could do with the wheelchair character. And yeah, just it was really eye-opening to have that opportunity. Like, although, you know, it was very last minute, they called me up and they're like, oh, you know, would you like to come skate with Tony Hawk? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And there's like, oh wait, can I actually get to the top of the ramp? They're like, oh yeah, we got a ladder to the top. So I'm like, oh, that might work. So I'm very privileged in the sense that I'm what you call an ambulatory wheelchair user. I can still get out of my chair and walk a little bit. But basically the way we ended up making this access work, it was like an 11-foot ramp they put in the middle of like the Fortitude Music Hall. And I just have like this massive rope with me with carabiners on each end, a bunch of knots on it. So you tie one end to the wheelchair, I then crawl up the ladder, and then once I'm at the top, pull the rope and pull my chair up there. So we did that like twice, and that was more than enough for me because it was just the workout of getting up there, but also the terror of like, because when you're dropping in on a wheelchair, particularly you know, you don't get to hug the sides like skateboarders do. You fall like about 2 meters, so it's very gnarly when you do it. But yeah, also part of that, I guess, leading to inspiring kids. There was one young man I met there. He was born without eyes, and he I made an effort to like visually describe to him like how big the ramp was, and I tried to like, you know, have a word with the security like, oh, can he come feel the ramp just so he can get an idea of what we were actually skating. And then from that, like, I was able to meet with his parents, and basically he's been joining me at the skate park for monthly skate sessions ever since, and he's absolute little shredder, got no fear. Like, he loves to do like spine transfers. Like, he's got sort of like a mix between a stroller and a wheelchair, so he has someone pushing him at all times, but he's always saying more and wants to do the biggest things possible. So like, it's not just, you know, throwing people in wheelchairs down ramps for fun. It's changing society's perception of what we can do. It's also showing that it's okay for us to fall. We're not going to break into a million pieces if we fall. If anything, it's good for us to fall. I call it, as an occupational therapist, it's something called dignity of risk. So that means, you know, despite disability, you still deserve the right to take risks. You still deserve the right, you know, an informed risk. So we know that skateboarding is dangerous. So when I take people to the park in their wheelchairs, I give them helmets, I give them pads, and we start out small. And then it's up to them if they want to do bigger ramps and stuff. But it's not just, you know, sending it down ramps for fun. At the end of it, they come out of it knowing, okay, if I go out into Brisbane City and I find this massive hill that I'm terrified of, I now know that I can go down it. Or if I find this ramp that's a little too steep, I'm not sure if I can do it, I now have the confidence to try, or at least I can, you know, try, and Dad will be behind me to catch me. It's just really using the built environment to give people those skills where they can, you know, go out and live the most independent, fulfilling lives possible.
Thank you, Tim. So I might add that tonight's questions are sort of an amalgamation of various ones sent in by the audience. And we'll also have some available on hand and also in question time as well. And also that Nikki Hayes has also been sort of co-designing this panel with me tonight. And so we're actually going to move on to you now, Nikki. So Spinifex Skateboards are the first Indigenous run skate brands in the continent. You have been visited by top skate industry bands, featured in national media such as NITV, in Slam Skate magazine, which is our version of Time magazine for skateboarders, I guess, and invited to numerous events. Let's sort of backtrack a bit though. How did Spinifex come to be, and sort of what does it do now?
Well, Spinifex was just an idea at first, and because of the love of skateboarding. I mean, I've been skateboarding for like 27 years now, and started skating Alice Springs in Barcelona, and which I was the only Indigenous kid skating in that town, and so from the love from that, and then I wanted to sort of do something that an idea, I guess, and then sort of fell into place where I was doing some youth work. I think it was back in 2015, and then really seek the idea of like maybe doing workshops, but also the youth engagement on all sides of that. And then I was going into town from community, and then just looking out the window, and as you do when you just see the landscape, you know, with beautiful hills and you know, the sky and stuff like that. And then I was just noticing, you know, all that, and then the Spinifex, all these Spinifex is coming across while I was just gawking out the window. And then I just thought, oh wow, Spinifex. And then I caught up with my mate Greg, and I said to him like, oh well, I think I've got an idea for a name. And then I said, what do you reckon about Spinifex Skateboards? And then he got me to sort of like repeat it heaps of times, and then like, oh yeah, Spinifex Skateboards. And then and so fast forward from that, you know, Spinifex was launched in 2020, I guess before the pandemic, and then now we do workshops outside of Alice Springs, across to other Indigenous communities and stuff like that. And also we collaborate with Songline Skateboarding as well, which is great for us to have other facilitators from the state to come, not just only to Ginger Porter, but like NT as well, and do massive like sort of trips as well further up north, not just Darwin, but also to Managareet and stuff like that. So we're reaching, you know, kids out in those remote communities across the Northern Territory and further, and also building Indigenous skateboarding at the same time.
Yeah, so the Songline Skateboarding is founded by Josh Rubin, is correct?
Yeah.
And it has Sonny is on the team. He's on the team at World of Willcraft up at St. Peters, and doing some wonderful things. Tell me about one of the tours that you've done with Songline. Where has that taken you? With the, I guess it's the continent's first Indigenous skate team on tour. Where have you been? Yeah,
it's the first Indigenous skate team that was assembled, Songline Skateboarding, and the first trip that I went on was to WA, to Karratha, Roebourne, and it was great to, it was actually at Perth first, actually, before Karratha and Roebourne, and actually Greg was there actually on that trip with me as well, and we kind of collaborated on actually filming and getting some clips and stuff like that for a video that we leaned into like a documentary, and that became the Songline documentary throughout that trip.
Yeah, I really encourage people to see that Songline documentary on YouTube and follow Spinifex on YouTube as well. We will actually talk about some other people that have come to visit you, but also in your videos as well, it's a really nice insight into the extreme talent going on. So somebody like Danny Campbell is, I think, was in the Olympic qualifiers this year as well. And can you tell me about Kieran Riley?
Well, it was pretty deadly to actually get to know Kieran Riley, like actually meet him once we all meet together in the Songlines team. But then also as well that when we did a demo in Barntour, and those guys came along as well as part of that. And after that demo, we sort of just went like, oh, let's go check out a skate spot. And then also, I think Greg was again sort of suggesting that, oh, we should go to the drains at Larapinta. And then, so we ended up going there, and a couple of us guys was kind of like, oh, we were keen for it. But then we sort of just went like, oh, maybe we just cruise around. And then Joshy and Kieran was like skating it. And I think Kieran was kind of like just sussing it out, like between the drains and like a bit of a hip kind of thing, and then a gap. So he looked at it, and then he said to me like, oh, I'll do an ad for you or something. I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, oh, I'll do a kickflip over this gap. And then and as soon as he said that, and then Greg says like, well, grab his camera, and then just like, oh, we'll shoot a photo. And it's like, okay, it's happening. But then it just seemed like it was just a regular session, but then it just turned out like me filming on another angle. Greg's got a camera out, and then Kieran's just trying this huge, massive kickflip over this gap, and then and then getting it. And then
Yeah.
it was surreal to actually, when Greg got the photo back and then like started just doing an ad and then putting that ad into Slam magazine.
Yeah. So Kieran's, I think, probably the first Indigenous skateboarder to have a shoe colorway, which is, again, like getting the brands, really backing the amazing talent out there. You actually had a recent skate park opening. It has been visited by a lot of prominent skaters. Most recently, Chuffed Roller Skaters did a collaboration with you, bringing out women skaters to do a workshop with local youth. What's the sort of social impact of doing something like that for Spinifex?
Well, I wanted to do something sort of different again, outside the box as well, the norm, and really wanted to have the community kids out there to have an option to do something else than just football, basketball, the go-to sports that, and roller skating was just an idea. I was like, oh, okay, cool, because roller skating is cool as well. It's basically the same as skateboarding, and I just thought of the idea. Then I reached out to Ashley Chetty and just had chats with her and bring the idea of like, okay, what do you reckon about like roller skating? Like, do you reckon you have like sort of maybe like come to Barcelona and Ginger Porter as well? And
did the girls love it? How did the girls like it? And actually, I think you said that the boys like the roller skating as well.
Yeah, the boys and girls really loved it.
Yeah.
Like, they were just spinning out and going, wow. And then they were just straight onto to roller skates and then with the safety gear as well. And the Chuff crew was really great as well. And it was great to meet Tia as well, that actually came as well.
All right. So we'll get back to your skate park and all the skate activities that you do soon. I might just now ask William some quick questions around his architectural practice. I did describe you as the youngest councillor in Sydney before, but also I think probably you should be the youngest Prime Minister if we can swing that as well one day. You're doing amazing things, but most importantly, I did actually meet William when we were doing some advocacy for a skate park in Ganyama Park, and there were a lot of unfriendly faces within that council meeting, and William was the friendly face. And so, sort of understanding the impact that it has for youth, and again, like activating these urban spaces for public play is really, really important. And when we have people in positions of power that are actually friendly and going to listen, they don't have to agree with us, but when they have that space that like, I'm going to listen and see your point of view, is actually very, very powerful for us and very much appreciated to have longer conversations about what we want and why. So I wanted to ask you, as an architect who have been involved with many projects that reinvigorates public spaces and integrates creative sports like skateboarding, with that example of Ganyama Park, which is actually multi-use, what architectural elements are vital for public space to be inclusive and allow for a range of users to coexist?
Bujari Gamarua, everyone, and thanks, Indigo. It's fantastic that you mentioned politicians, but also just members of the public and even architects. I think when we're designing public spaces, it's so important to have that skill of people watching and understanding how people use public spaces, especially spaces which might not be designed for them, or how people might use spaces differently. And being able to put that from the get-go and design it, integrate it, as Sana has said, into the publicness of a building or into the urban fabric is critical, especially if we want the play and the activation. I worked on the projects for the new International Convention Centre in Sydney, and I love what's now been dubbed Dancers Alley, which is in between ICC Theatre and the exhibition hall. And for those who have been past there, like it is a passage. It's a left behind space that could have been a very dark, dingy space, but also potentially would have been occupied by skaters who would activate such a space. But when the old convention centre was there, as the architects, we actually noticed that there were aluminium doors on the entries, and young people were using that to film themselves and to do dancing. And if you go in the morning of this current space, the elderly women from Chinatown are there with their music doing their traditional dances. When you're there at lunchtime, you have kids playing around. And then towards dusk, you've got all the TikTokers out there filming. And I think it's such a great sense of how that, in terms of people watching and how people actually use spaces differently, that door wasn't designed that way, and now it's been integrated into the new building. And in fact, it's evolved because more mirrors have been put around the convention centre now to activate it, to actually allow people to feel that they have ownership and belonging. And it's the same in terms of the city's Glebe Foreshore skate park, which was designed in conjunction, co-designed with 100 skateboarders from the Sydney Skateboarding Association. And again, in terms of, rather than seeing it as a separate element or an add-on, it was designed from the get-go with the right users. And that's how we came about the incredible skate park, the urban street skate that goes underneath the viaduct of the light rail, combining heritage, transport in terms of a park, but also the nearby playground. And again, it's also about visibility. I think if we can bring that activation, that sense of play and fun to the foreground of our public spaces, and we've done so with people going across the light rail of the inner west, they can look down and know, that's so cool, I want to have a go there. But also the young kids on the playgrounds, the children, they look up to the skaters as role models, and they see a sense of belonging and community. So it's not only just about the architectural and designed elements, it's actually about the social elements, that a sense of place and good urban design, and through that planning process, that's what's creating, and that's what we need in the publicness of our city.
Thank you for that sort of really holistic approach to how we look at city, and particularly through your eyes. I know Dance Alley very well. I was filming with some skateboarders there, and we just thought it was amazing that we had a whole bunch of people doing K-pop in the background. It made us look like we'd hired them or something. It's a very popular place. And just briefly to the Sydney Skateboarding Association, last night we had a hangout with Spinifex showing some of their videos last night, and we had Trent is one of the founding members of the Sydney Skateboarding Association as well at Passport, so really interesting history. When we see a skate space built, it's not overnight. It's taken often a lot of advocacy for a very long time, which leads me actually to my next question is, how do young people and skaters of any age get to have a say in the design and take up a place in the city? And what can you learn from their input?
And I think it's interesting your comment about being in the council chambers, really advocating for Ganyama Park and speaking to the Lord Mayor and elected officials. And I'm not sure probably what your experience is dealing with councils in Newcastle. And I hope they're somewhat more friendly in terms of the beach culture and that kind of scene as well. But I think it's really important that we recognise that planning processes, and the past 3 years I've been on council, chairing urban planning and development for the city, that I've realised that it's been designed to exclude. That whole system is designed to exclude the public from understanding, from making submissions, from even accessing councillors and the elected politicians that make those decisions. And I think it's really important that, firstly, we do need younger elected representatives to make these decisions based on the lived experiences that they have. But also, it's so critical that we advocate and represent our community, because it is about belonging, and public spaces should be for everyone. I've been following very intently what's been happening in neighbouring council Woollahra, which is very conservative, but also has a very different demographic in terms of City of Sydney. And at Rushcutters Bay, in terms of the Woollahra Council Parks, for over a decade now, the young people who live there in that part of the council, they've been championing and lobbying for so long for a skate park at Rushcutters Bay. And during those council meetings, every time it was brought up, I remember Malcolm Turnbull as Prime Minister, who was the federal MP of Wentworth at that time. He said all the kids should go down to Bondi. They shouldn't skate here. That's exclusion right there. And in fact, he said,
adding concrete structures and hard surfaces is not considerate of the area of Wentworth and of the park. And it's fascinating because when we're talking about concrete structures, flat surfaces, hard surfaces, asphalt, 80% of our public spaces are our streets and roads, and they're for cars. They're not even for people to use. 80% of our public spaces in the city. And so I think it's really important for us to actually challenge a lot of these long-held kind of beliefs or ideologies, political ideologies even, in terms of what makes our city. And the fact that when we do engage and when we are part of that discourse, political discourse, when we are fighting for better public spaces that represent who we are, that we can enjoy and have ownership over, that's when we have democracy. And that's when democracy plays out in the public sphere. So I think it's so important that we do keep pushing. And it is a challenge when we are not represented, especially a younger generation. But also to look at, for example, the City of Sydney, we've adopted a child-friendly city policy. And understanding how we can not only treat now skate parks as a sporting facility, just like a council providing tennis courts or basketball courts or aquatic centres for the public to use, but actually having play along the way, how we can incorporate playable elements along our streets. And that's a new driver and vision in terms of not just creating playgrounds and having specific sites that's been zoned and designed for public recreation, but do so on our footpaths and do so in our pocket parks and in any other kind of space where it is public.
Thank you for that really strong insight into the different dynamics that you navigate in your various roles. I know tonight here we have Sam from Phoenix Cruises Women's Skate Sydney Club, and she has already raised the idea of Rushcutters Bay being a place where girls, women, non-binary people of all genders feel safe hanging out with their skateboards, skating along the pavement. And, it's really, these sort of events are really important, not just for us to sit here in the panel and sort of have this one-way conversation to an audience, but in this break time, people like Sam and her group are actually very keen to do advocacy around that Rushcutters Bay again. And I know with the Sydney Skateboarding Association, they've done amazing work, but and they are like definitely heroes of the skateboarding scene. They're men, right? They're all men. They look like skaters. They're not like a whole bunch of people that have different types of, bodies, different types of backgrounds in that. I think in the current scene now, we have advocates for public spaces being used for urban play that have a whole different type of demographics. It's time to sort of reactivate that kind of advocacy for using public space with how our panel looks here, with how it looks at the skate park, which is very different from a lot of the earlier sort of advocacy that has done amazing work. But it really is nice that we can have these conversations now on board with a range of people. Poppy, I did want to ask you, you're a Tokyo Olympian, but when we're chatting on our panel pre-chat, you mentioned something about being moved on, like security don't sort of say, can I have your autograph if you're street skating? What's the reaction if you are street skating with your friends or you're out in the street with your boards?
Usually when we're out street skating, I mean, there's some places where it's okay, but majority of the time you'll get kicked out. It doesn't really matter what kind of, status you hold in skateboarding. It's usually pretty similar where you go, you try and skate a street spot, you'll usually get kicked out. At skate parks, it's sometimes different, but that's kind of more the experience I've had with that sort of thing. And sometimes I'll try and pull like the Olympic plug and I'll be like, no, I'm training for the Olympics. But they don't really believe me, but yeah.
We all tried that in COVID when you were only allowed out if you could exercise, and we're saying, no, we're all training for the Olympics.
Yeah.
And we're definitely, my friends and I love our skateboarding, but yeah, we couldn't pull that one.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. Do you think you're at a point now, Poppy, with the type of crews that you hang out with, and you have access to a range of really amazing networks at skate? What kind of people would you like to bring to the table to argue that skateboarding in public places and things like co-designing skatable art Like, who would you bring to the table if we had somebody that we could talk to about changing things?
I think you mentioned Mimi Nu before. She's always been sort of a role model of mine. She was a professional skateboarder and is really promoting women and females and all non-traditional skateboarders in sport. And she'd definitely be someone I have up there. Also, one of my role models is Alexis Sablone, and she's a professional skateboarder. And she is also an artist and an architect and has designed a couple sculptures, like skatable sculptures in Malmo and Copenhagen, I think, and lots of different kind of spaces like that in little plazas that skaters can go and skate as well. And I just think it's like such an incredible idea, and it is in these plazas and these artworks, and it brings all these people together to skate. And it's just such a community. And I think that's really cool. So, yeah, those are two people that I would have.
Very, very powerful. So a lot of people, for the story for Alexis Sablone, they are Olympian again from Tokyo. I think they're in their 30s. They're MIT graduate from architecture, and it's true that they have been able to get invitations and commissions to build skatable sculptures in places like Europe. So here in Australia, we're trying to push that movement as well. Like, let us have art that we can play with and skate. Okay, we're going to be moving now over to an open mic session, is that right? And I've got some questions to look at as well. So, does anyone have any questions for the panel? And the wonderful Greta is going to assist us with handing you over the mic. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. This question is majorly from the perspective of a pedestrian who is walking on the footpath, and I see a skateboarder coming and using skateboard as a transit medium, which is so cool. I mean, they're not relying on motor vehicle. But then me as a pedestrian who's walking, mostly on my phone or listening to music, get startled. So I have question with perspective. What would you suggest me as someone who wants to be a urban dweller, who wants to be inclusive, and also someone who's a budding planner, how to incorporate skaters and skateboarders in the transit medium?
That's a really great question. Actually, I might start with you, Sana, on that one, and transit. Because you'd actually, Sana has been speaking to people in transit that have like an unusual attitude towards when you ask them, can you have skatable sculptures?
Yeah, but this is more, you're thinking, are you referring more to, what sort of spaces are you referring to? Footpaths and things.
Yeah.
I guess in terms of like as an urban planner, you're seeking some feedback.
I think the Docklands, the Docklands one's a really exciting one, maybe.
Yeah, I am actually challenged. I'm currently in a situation where I'm negotiating that very question, and I can't answer it because we're in the middle of negotiations. But there's a sort of $1 million project I'm working on in the city of Melbourne, Docklands, and they really need to activate the waterfront there. It's sort of a dead zone. And there are cyclists that go zipping past. That's the only real reason that they're the only real users of that space. But they want people to dwell. They want people to stay. And I'm trying to. Originally, I'd been selected to just put sort of big public artworks there. But I'm trying to sort of wind back that proposal and have more integrated sort of playable, skatable, sport-activated sculptures. But there is a lot of pushback, and they say, but then the pedestrians are going to be afraid, and then this. So it's a process of negotiation, and we're really not through it, and there isn't really a way. It's not a clear precedent yet that I'm aware of, at least, where both of those can coexist. Really mutually effectively. I mean, I think it's just really, if you've got footpaths wide enough, then there's plenty of room for everything and for everyone. Ultimately, I think the problem is a problem of perception. We see skateboarding as problematic, and that's the bit that needs to change. Once we're aware, once we're not blind anymore to the different ways that space can be used at the same time, once we start understanding the language of that and the sensibility of that, then we just, like in Holland, where I'm originally from, I've sort of had a lot of origins, but you know, cycling is just part of daily life. You just live with it. You don't. It's not even a question in urban design and urban planning. You walk and cycle and negotiate space unconsciously. It's so ingrained in the cultural life of the Netherlands. So, you know, I think we just need to have a perceptual shift and a cultural shift, and then the planning, you know, can be part of that shift. And advocacy is that what we're showing outside is just a tiny little sample of what's possible. And once we've got a few more examples, we just pump those, we just advocate. We say, look, here's a demonstration of how skatable sculpture can be inoffensive, you know, it's inclusive, we are demonstrating it, and then we show it to council and we have those conversations. But these are generational conversations. They don't happen overnight. You know, Holland's been doing it for hundreds and hundreds of years, you know.
So I'd really like to actually pick up on that point again. Like, we have some very, very wonderful people in the audience who have been part of a symposium for the past 2 days, giving various papers and also just assisting us with co-designing the research. So the people including Aaron Christensen, who's been activating our skate space as a landscape architect, second year, I believe, and there are just a range of people that have been doing this work as skateboarders as well, and would have some really, really exciting conversations with you. But it does actually make me want to ask Poppy the question. Did you mention Copenhagen? Have you been to the Copenhagen Open? Can you explain what happens to the streets there to us?
Copenhagen Open is, you know, this big skating event, non-traditional skating event. It's like they have different little competitions all over the city, but it's not really serious. It's everyone coming together, and people come from all over the world. It's such a fun time. I experienced my first one last year, and it's so much fun. There's like hundreds and hundreds of skaters, and you have all these different pinpoints on the map throughout a couple of days. And there's just these events where anyone can come, anyone can skate. You can win money, you can win prizes, and you party, you have fun. It's an amazing experience, and the whole of Copenhagen's kind of behind it. They know it because there'll be hundreds of skaters going past you in the street. It really lights up the city, and it's a super, super fun event.
So we're almost towards the end of this, and we have lots of time in discussion time outside. We're going to have some catering and everything, and some nice food to have more discussion over this. But just to round this up, we've got about 5 more minutes left. I have one final question for each of the panelists, and I might start down with you, Poppy, and move this way. If you could give council, urban planners, designers one command or one big wish, what would that be?
One big wish, I'd probably ask for more inclusivity, I think, for skateboarders and urban spaces, and creating these plazas and places for skateboarders, because it's such an amazing outlet, and I think it would really add a lot to the community, especially for young people, but everyone, and bring people together. I think that would be super, super cool.
That sounds really cool. William, what would your...
For me, I think it's important councils, decision makers, planners, architects take the risk. Skateboarders are taking the risk in terms of what we do as a hobby, as a sport. And when we look at, say, even pedestrianisation and navigating and our streets, and even reallocation of our street space and road space, which the City of Sydney is doing. I've been chairing traffic committee, or what we, at the City of Sydney, we've called it traffic calming committee, because that's a priority for us. I've been always talking about how good it is that we're now pushing through continuous footpath treatments, which is where it's a flash service on our footpaths continuously all the way across roads, which creates a little hump for cars, which does traffic calming. But I didn't realise until we had somebody who uses assistant animals come up to us in council and say, actually, this is not accessible for us. And to Tim's point in terms of how do we look at and design and make sure that we're constantly evolving and pushing the boundary and taking that risk, and how we actually make that happen. And now the city is working with Inner West Council, because the assistant animals cannot read the tactiles. And prior to that, they could read the curbs, that it dropped to a different
level onto the road surface. And because of that, we're now trying to find different ways to make it good for pedestrians who enjoy flash surfaces, but also those who are differently able to also make sure that's accessible. And I also want to mention in terms of risk, for example, Melbourne City Council has really pushed the boundary of playgrounds. They've created the Risky Playgrounds, which has been done by artist and landscape designer Mark Hewson, where all the elements seems like they're going to roll off or they're going to fall off, and they've got done like fake concrete, which is actually spongy, so that children can learn about what risk levels and their limitations, and to really get kids outside of their home and off digital platforms and actually engage in our built environments that way.
Thank you for that. In the break, when you get a chance to meet the artist of the artwork outside Sana, Dr. Mestrom, please ask her about Mike Hewson's role last year in the symposium that we held this year. In the previous year, he was a keynote, right?
Yep.
So yeah, really excellent work. Nikki, what's your wish list or command for a council?
Again, like the same as Poppy, like more inclusive, but also I guess council's got to also listen to community at first, and also more collaboration with like sort of skate park users and stuff like that, and really sort of listen to like the community in a different angle as well. That's my wish as well, and for more continuing sort of stuff where like broaden the ideas of like instead of just like okay, we're going to do things on one side than the other.
Yeah, so Nikki, you're actually out here on a tour of Gadigal country and Darug land and Wangal land as well, with Greg Barnes, who's over here, and I hope people get to chat with him as well, who's been doing a lot of skate park advocacy and many other great things for Empire Way, for Alice Springs Skate Park. We had this discussion in the break that there's some sort of difference between what we would see as councillors, non-Indigenous people, and Aboriginal councils. Can you briefly talk to that, what Greg and you were discussing with the Aboriginal councils as well? Is it various sort of processes, etiquette, cultural protocols as well when you're building skate parks and things?
Well, it was a really interesting process for the council at Ginger Porter, much different than council in town in Nabantua, which Greg Barnes was fighting towards sort of getting another new skate park in Nabantua. So that's still ongoing, but also it's reached to a stage now where there is design of a skate park and stuff like that, and that's the process now. But the process that I went through with the community council was a bit difficult between sort of pushing for a skate park in a remote community, especially like they will rather kind of like prefer a couple of other things or not. But for the support that I got from the community and the community development side of things as well, and the corporations as well, where the massive backing as the Aboriginal corporation in my community that helped started and pushing forward and getting the bigger council as well, the Indigenous Central Land Council on board as well, and really pushing for an outdoor skate park and something that's kind of like really different than just a like a urban sort of area.
Yeah. I really hope people get to talk with Nikki in the break about firstly the Ginger Porter skate park. It's a first in many ways as well, but also for the for Alice Springs skate park, the amount of advocacy going on there, and we did discuss that these skate parks aren't built by individuals by no means, it's community. And I really like the emphasis that you put on that as well. It'd be really great to hear more. What's your wish list, Tim? Big wish.
I wish for councils, consult people with lived experience, so not just disabled people, everyone in the community. Biggest recommendation, if you're not sure, consult those folks, jump in a wheelchair, have a go at navigating a community, jump on a skateboard, have a go at navigating a community, just different sort of ways, like get that different perspective by, I guess, stepping in someone else's shoes, stepping in someone else's wheels, just, see what it's like from someone else's point of view, because really, I know what it's like. You can get stuck in your own viewpoint so much, and it takes, someone to actually just put you on a board or in a chair and be like, no, see it this way. So, if you don't know, ask, and, don't go off assumptions, because we all know what assumptions do.
Thank you. I think we're at a very vulnerable and interesting time with skateboarding in what we do, in that it's very popular. Everybody wants a piece of the pie. We often have these conversations that we'd really love people that will help us do what we do rather than helping themselves do what we do. And that lived experience as well, like we're trying to navigate that. There's been a very sort of insular attitude around skateboarding that is by skaters for skaters as well. And now we're at this point where we are collaborating with people. Is there like some kind of model, or have you ever been asked to design sort of an indexing of how people can actually do good co-design? Have we ever had something that we've created around that to guide people how to do that well and ethically?
It's sort of an area that's developing itself at the moment, so co-design, particularly with people with disabilities, it's only really popped up in the last 5-10 years. But it can extend beyond just consulting people with disabilities, really just like having those meetings with community, so elderly populations, younger populations, every part of the community, giving them a chance to put forward their voice and ideas, so that way we can develop the most universally designed inclusive infrastructure. So that way basically the way we achieve inclusion is you make the environment inclusive, because you don't see people where they can't get to. So you won't see a wheelchair user at a club up lots of stairs because they can't get there. If you have a ramp up there, we can get there. So basically you can't be what you can't see, and you can't go where you can't access. So changing those things is really the key to making it all better.
Okay, so I'm getting a really sort of warm and encouraging look from Nicole to make this quick. Thank you, to keep on time, because we do have some wonderful chats to have in the audience, and I know that we didn't cover all the questions, but we have a wonderful occasion to do this outside. Sana, your wish to council?
Actually, my wish wouldn't be to council. It's more because I think that's a sort of a top-down approach. Yep. I always take a really long-term view, and I'm interested in generational shifts. Mm-hmm. And I am interested in communicating actually with kids and building an appetite for risk and a language of inclusion there. And then hopefully it comes up, through the roots into the trunk and comes out that way. Yeah. So I think that's where my sort of advocacy sits, is sort of in that sort of really,
And we did talk about the seeding approach and that intergenerational approach, that skateboarding has actually been around for 50 years, and we have to think about, what would it look like in 100 years? So it's a really interesting way to think about the built environment and grey spaces into the future, and taking a multi-generational approach as well. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand back to you.
Wow, look, fantastic. I was so reluctantly giving the wind-up signal there, because I just want to listen to this group all night. But, the caterers have got to go home at a certain point in time. Thank you. You've been a wonderful audience, but especially thank you to all of our speakers. Make sure you check out the Spinifex skateboards at the back. They're absolutely glorious. And but with that, thank you all. That was brilliant.